In one of his books, James Dobson tells about a friend of his when he was going through medical school and college, who one day was loaded down with all the books that he had to carry to his class along with his briefcase. He just didn't have any spare arms to carry anything more. When he was going by the little fast food cart and decided that he needed some lunch. So he ordered his lunch, and he managed to put down his books long enough to lift up his food and put it on top of his briefcase, and then lift up the milkshake that he also ordered and put it on top of his briefcase, and then pick up his books to walk over and try to find an open table to sit at and finish his lunch. Well, as he was looking around for a table, he thought he'd have a little sip of that milkshake. It sounded pretty good to him. And so as he's looking around, he's sort of distracted and leaning down to get the straw in his mouth to take a sip of the milkshake. Only he misses his mouth entirely, and the straw goes right up his nose. And now he's feeling embarrassed because he's got this straw in his nose, and he thinks, well, the best thing to do right now, I guess, is just ease my head up and the straw will fall out and maybe nobody will have seen. So he pulls his head up, and the straw comes out of the cup and starts dripping the milkshake all over the front of his suit. Reminds me of the fact that things don't always work out the way that we plan them. You know, the things that we imagine in our minds and the things that we work towards don't always arrive at where we expected them to. In fact, many of our plans can lead to disaster. Our text for this morning is Proverbs chapter 19, verse 21, which says this: "Many plans are in a man's heart, but the counsel of the Lord will stand." Many plans are in a man's heart. It's been said that those who fail to plan to fail. That we aren't engaged in living according to a plan, that we're setting ourselves for disaster. And there's some truth in that. We need direction. We need guidance. We need to have a goal in front of us sometimes. We need to have a plan and work the plan sometimes. But you know, our biggest problem isn't a failure to have a plan, but sometimes it's having too many plans. It's having too many ideas of what we want to accomplish, and too many things which sound like good ideas that we direct our hearts and minds towards. Something sparks our imagination, and pretty soon we have a plan in place about what we're going to do about that. As our text says, our heart devises many plans. Our lack of accomplishment oftentimes isn't because we don't have a plan, but because we have too many plans. We're looking in too many directions at the same time. Now, as a boy, I was a chronic daydreamer. I say that as a boy to sort of get over the fact that I'm still a chronic daydreamer, but not as bad as I was as a boy. But my mind was constantly building those scenarios, constantly thinking about plans and ideas for the future and things that I was going to do someday. Building whole worlds on lofty dreams and plans. But it's not just the amount of plans that frustrate us sometimes. We often fail because our plans just aren't sufficient. The things that we think will line up things to make them the way that we want to aren't going to work for us. And the things that we dream of being able to accomplish oftentimes outpace what we actually are able to accomplish. My plans oftentimes are way more than my accomplishments. For instance, when it comes to my vacation time, I'm just coming off vacation right now, and I know about the plans I have for vacation time every year. That's my free time. That's the time when I'm not obligated in a dozen different directions. So I make my plans about all the things I want to accomplish the next time I have that amount of time set aside. You know, all these projects I'm going to take on, all these things I'm going to finally complete. Well, it comes down to all those dozens of plans I had for this last vacation time, and I got one thing accomplished that was on my list. I got out to Missouri to see my family and visit with my mom for a while. That was the only thing on my list that I got accomplished on this vacation. And I want to say that it's not unusual that happens. In fact, some of the plans that I make to accomplish each year are plans that I've had maybe for 10 years that I planned on doing the next time vacation time rolled around. Not all human plans fail. Not everything that we propose to do comes to ruin. For instance, we've been planning this year's Praise in the Park for a whole year before it took place this last week. And last Sunday, on that beautiful day that the Lord gave us, most of those plans were fulfilled pretty nicely. Not everything came about the way that we thought it was going to, but some things came out even better than we thought was going to happen. It was wonderful to see those plans be brought together with the Lord's blessing that way. But some of our plans are all over the place. I remember writing to my grandmother Dee Dee when I was young. She lived out in California. I only got to see her a couple times during my life, during her life. But I used to like to write her all the time. And when I was about 12 years old, I wrote her about my plans for the future. I told her I had serious plans that someday I was going to be a forest ranger or an architect. Nothing about being a preacher there, you know. Forest ranger or an architect, that was my idea about what my future held for me. In fact, I would be very much surprised as a boy making plans for my future what it actually is as I'm now at 58 years old. And yet if the Lord gives me a couple more decades, I'm sure that the things I intend right now are going to look a whole lot different in 20 years from the way they are imagined right at this present time. My plans are all over the place. Sometimes they are not realized. After all, the future for us is speculation. And speculation is based on experience mixed with wishful thinking. There's not much behind what we do to plan for the future. And the billions of dollars raked in by the casinos in Las Vegas year after year, we see a testimony to how human speculation is faulty. Those people that go to Las Vegas didn't intend to lose all that money, but they did it anyway in spite of their plans. And those who claim to have special powers to know the future are charlatans or they're self-deceived. You can gaze into a crystal ball, you can consult your horoscope, you can look to a psychic, but you aren't going to gain any real insight about what tomorrow holds. If those things really worked, then those people would be winning the lottery on a regular basis, but they don't know what tomorrow holds. And we can't know what tomorrow holds by consulting things like that. You can get all starry-eyed and dream whatever you want to dream. Maybe have very vivid dreams. But it's merely wishful thinking, not a solid foundation on which to build your future. Now, planning isn't wrong, but let us not give in to the conceit that simply because we plan something, we're going to accomplish it. That's the arrogance of the mystical religiosity that people buy into all the time around us. You know, name it and claim it, or believe it strong enough, focus your mind on it, and you're going to achieve it. That if we can accomplish anything if only we put our mind to it. Well, it's not true. We have a better chance of achieving something that we're planning and working for, but we can't see tomorrow, nor can we control the events which lead to our future. Take, for instance, one's dream about becoming a concert pianist. One young woman is schooled in the piano from a very young age by the very best teachers. She spends the long hours in practice. She forsakes all the things that her friends want her to be involved in so that she can dedicate herself to her music. She goes to the right schools, but somehow when she reaches maturity, despite all her hope and her dreams, her work, her plans, she doesn't have the necessary talent to ever become exceptional in playing the piano. And merely good pianists are a dime a dozen. And instead of the concert hall, she finds herself making ends meet as a studio pianist, doing backup instrumentals for groups and recording commercial jingles. Life's a whole lot different than what she had planned it to be, in spite of her efforts to carry out her plans. Of course, it could have gone in a million different other ways, too, to lead to ruin of those plans. She might have injured her hands, and so lost the dexterity necessary to accomplish her purpose. She might have died in a car accident. We don't know. Anytime we get into the car, we're going to make it to our destination. She might have been overtaken by a serious illness. She might have become distracted and failed to continue working for her musical career. She might have decided that she really didn't want that life and began pursuing other plans. She might have depleted her funds and been unable to complete her training. She might have made a terrible mistake in her first concert so that she was panned by the critics and never had an opportunity again to play publicly. What we're saying here is there's a whole lot of ways that our plans don't come to fruition. There's a whole lot of ways that in spite of our best intentions and our best efforts, sometimes we don't arrive at where we want to be. For all our plans, we are not in control. We can't make things happen. And eventually we must concede that it's a waste of our lives to base our life on our plans. Yes, it's good to have plans. Yes, it's good to have direction in our lives. But to base your life on human plans, that's foolishness. Jesus told a parable that we're all familiar with in Luke chapter 12, verses 16 through 20. He says, "The land of a rich man was very productive, and began reasoning to himself, saying, 'What shall I do, since I have no place to store my crops?' Then he said, 'This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and build larger ones. And there I'll store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have many goods laid up for many years to come. Take your ease, eat, drink, and be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now who will own what you prepared?'" All of our efforts, all of our plans can be erased in a moment. If our lives are based on our plans, then we're gambling with our lives. And as with a compulsive gambler, you might win occasionally, but a lifetime of gambling is going to lead to ruin. If our lives are based upon our plans, they will lead to ruin. So we dare not base our life on our plans. But then our passage says this, "But the counsel of the Lord will stand." You know, there's a whole lot of people that want to offer you counsel. There's many professionals, paid consultants, who are willing to sell their services to you. They have their impressive degrees framed on the walls of their offices. They want to give you a little counsel. Then there's that other kind of counsel that other people are offering up to you. There's friends, coworkers, neighbors, nosy strangers who will offer you their counsel for free. Somebody said opinions are like belly buttons. Everybody has one. To which I might add that those opinions are about as useful as a belly button. Free and worth every penny of it. But all those human counselors, free or paid, have the same limitations that you had in making your plans. They can't see tomorrow. Their counsel is based upon experience and wishful thinking. You may already know where I'm going with this. The only counsel that is reliable is that of him who knows tomorrow. The only counsel which is going to take us where we want to go into the future is the counsel of him who knows what is ahead, who knows what tomorrow holds. And his counsel is also free, by the way. It's given to us without cost in his word. And yet it's free not because it's worthless, but because it's priceless. And only by seeking his counsel can we know the way to direct our feet. Now, if you consult the original Hebrew here in this passage, and you look at that word that we've translated into the English word counsel, you might find that the original Hebrew word there is another word for plans. Just like it said before about man's plans, it's using a different word, but it has that same meaning. It's talking about plans once again, but this time it's talking about God's plans. Proverbs is a book of poetry, as we've noted before. Hebrew poetry is a lot different from English poetry. English poetry is based on rhyme and meter oftentimes. But Hebrew poetry is based upon contrasting and comparative thoughts. Thoughts which are in agreement but stated slightly differently, or thoughts which contrast with each other. And these things form the poetry that the Hebrews used. In this case, the verse pivots on the comparison of man's plans with God's plans. It's that contrast. Man has many plans, but the counsel of the Lord will stand. The plans of God will stand. The choice offered us in this passage is between living our lives according to our plans or submitting ourselves to His plans. The plans of the human heart are many and they're unreliable, but God's plans are focused and they are absolutely sure. Psalm 33 verse 11 says, "But the plans of the Lord stand firm forever, the purposes of His heart through all generations." God's plans are sure. The only question is whose plans we're going to listen to, in the direction that we set our feet, in the way that we live our lives, in the day in and day out of what we say and do. Whose plans are going to be guiding our steps? Are we going to trust our plans or the plans that other people will counsel us with? Or are we going to turn to God and trust in His plans? Trust is the key here this morning. And that's what brings us to our invitation time this morning. Whether you will trust your life with God's plans, whether you will give Him control over your life. This morning, if you'd like to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior and begin living your life not according to your plans and your imagination, but according to His plans for you. This morning, if you have any decision that you need to make, we want to give you an opportunity to respond. And we invite you to come forward just now as we stand and sing our invitation song, "Take My Life."